She died in what they called a simple accident, a slip on the basement stairs. But the moment I found her, the air went cold, the lights flickered, and the house felt alive in a way it never had before. That night, shadows stretched longer, whispers brushed past my ears, and my mother's ghost made damn sure we uncovered a truth darker than death itself. Not that the day mattered, but I always remember it. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon. She'd been baking. There was a chill in the house, even though it was July. And when I came home from school, the lights were flickering like the whole place was trying to speak. I found her at the bottom of the basement stairs, neck twisted, one eye open. She looked like she was still mid-sentence. They called it an accident. The cops, the paramedics, even Evan, my brother. She must have slipped, he said, again and again, like repeating it would make it true. But I knew better. If you like tales that linger long after the lights go out, hit like and subscribe, because the next story might just find you. Because hours after they wheeled her body away, I found the first message. Written in fog on the bathroom mirror, "Don't trust the doctor." That was just the beginning. 2 years later, the house still smelled like her. Lavender and something else. Paper maybe. Old paper and ink. I hadn't left. Evan moved out 6 months after the funeral. He said he couldn't take it anymore. The creaking pipes, the smell, the quiet. I think he meant the grief, but he never said the word. I stayed, not because I was strong or sentimental. I stayed because the house wasn't done with us. I felt it, like every room was holding its breath. Every night, I heard footsteps above my ceiling, but there was no attic. Every morning, the music box Mom had since she was a girl would be wound up and playing. I'd stopped thinking it was coincidence. But it wasn't until the basement door opened by itself that I admitted what I'd known all along. She was still here. And she wasn't resting. Chapter 2. The door didn't creak open like in the movies. It popped, like something pressing from the other side had finally broken the seal. I stood at the top of the stairs, heart jackhammering in my chest. The light switch didn't work. Of course it didn't. I grabbed my phone and flicked on the flashlight. Dust swirled in the air like it had been disturbed, like something had been moving around down there. I should have turned back, but I didn't. Something pulled me forward. Not physically, not like in horror stories, but emotionally, like guilt. Like curiosity twisted into a rope and yanked. Halfway down, I saw it. One of Mom's old nurse badges, propped on the third step like it had been left there on purpose. Her name, Laura Gibbons, printed in crisp blue letters. The photo faded. I picked it up. It was ice cold. "Okay, Mom," I whispered. "I'm listening." I found the first box under the old tool bench. A cardboard storage bin labeled in black Sharpie. Truth. Inside, hospital records, handwritten notes, photocopies of incident reports, and a red spiral notebook with one word on the cover: Juliet. I opened it. Page 1. "If you're reading this, I'm already dead." And it wasn't an accident. I brought the notebook upstairs and laid it flat on the kitchen table. The pages were filled with tightly packed handwriting. My mom's unmistakable. I recognized her shorthand. Circles meant patient transfers. Triangles meant deaths. There were a lot of triangles. Each entry followed a pattern. Date, patient initials, equipment used, and a final note: outcome unexpected. Over and over again. Evan showed up an hour later. I didn't call him, but he came. He always had that sense when something was off. His eyes locked on the notebook the second he walked in. "What is that?" "You need to see it for yourself," I said. He read in silence for 10 minutes. Then, Jesus Christ. The last entry was different. There was no date, no name, just a single line. "If they find this, they'll come for you too." He closed the book slowly. "We need to go to the police." I shook my head. They already ruled it an accident. He looked up at me. "Then we go public." I didn't answer, because I was staring past him. The hallway light had turned on by itself, and the basement door was open again. We stood frozen. Evan turned around slowly. His eyes flicked to the open doorway, then back to me. "Is this normal now?" he whispered. I nodded. "More than it should be." He crossed the room and shut the door, locking the deadbolt. It clicked, and somehow that made it worse. Like we'd just agreed not to look at the lion in the living room. Let's finish the notebook, I said, gesturing back to the table. We read page after page, cross-referencing names and dates. Mom had created a log of equipment failures, ICU cases, respirators that shut off without alarms, patients who died after routine procedures, all swept under the rug. She was building a case, Evan said, tracing his finger down a column of initials. Look at this. Same night shifts, same doctor signatures. And then, there it was again. Dr. Alan Wright. The name appeared on nearly every form, buried in physician approval lines or discharge summaries. Always last minute, never questioned. I opened my laptop and started digging. He'd worked at St. Francis where Mom had spent her final years, but his name wasn't on the hospital's public staff directory. No social media presence, no photos. But I found something else. An old newspaper article from 1997. A different hospital. A different city, but the same name. Hospital faces wrongful death lawsuit after patient's respirator fails. Doctor of record, Alan R. Wright. The article had no follow-up, and then my laptop shut off. Dead. Fully charged. Gone. The basement door rattled in its frame. Not wind, not a draft. Like fists pounding from the inside. Evan grabbed his keys. We're staying at my place tonight. Grab the book. I nodded, but before I moved, I saw it, scratched faintly into the table beneath the notebook. Juliet. It hadn't been there before. Evan didn't say anything until we were halfway to his place. The notebook sat on his lap, and he kept glancing at it like it might explode. Do you think she wrote that into the table somehow? Like earlier? He asked. No, I said. The table's oak. You can't scratch it without tools, and it was fresh, like whatever did it had just finished. He went quiet again. When we pulled into the driveway, I hesitated. You sure we should bring it inside? He didn't answer, just got out, slammed the door, and walked to the porch. I followed. Inside, we laid everything out on his dining room table. The notebook, the printouts, a handful of items we'd pulled from the basement box. I added Mom's nurse badge. We need someone who worked with her, Evan said. Someone still alive. Someone who isn't scared to talk. Janice, I said instantly. She and Mom worked nights together. They were close. He grabbed his laptop and started searching. Janice Withers, still local, there's a number. I called. Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't used it much lately. But when I said my name, she went quiet. Your mother told me this might happen, she said. Come by, bring the red notebook. I didn't show her the message. Evan was already on edge, and Janice's hands were shaking too much to hold her mug steady. Whatever truth she was sitting on, it had been boiling under the surface for years. No need to stir the pot yet. Instead, I tucked the phone back into my pocket and asked, did you ever report any of it? Janice gave a small, bitter laugh. To who? Admin? HR? The same people writing his paychecks? No. I just documented things. Your mom did more than that. She collected evidence. She left some of it with me. She got up slowly and shuffled into the back room. Evan and I exchanged a look. We can't trust her, he whispered. That message… We don't know who sent it, I shot back, or if it's even human. Before he could respond, Janice returned with a metal tin. She opened it and laid out its contents on the table, 3 VHS tapes, a sealed envelope, and a worn black notebook. Laura gave me these a week before she died, said if anything happened to her, you'd come. My throat tightened. Janice pushed the envelope toward me. I opened it carefully. Inside, a photo of a medical chart, a patient wristband, and a small piece of paper with a single name. Juliet 1. Was it a person? Evan asked. Janice shook her head. It was a prototype, a phase, a code, something the hospital ran decades ago, way before our time. But it didn't end. They just renamed it, hid it deeper. Right. He was part of it then too. I think he's the constant. How's that possible? I asked. Janice met my eyes. Because whatever he is, he doesn't die. A gust rattled the windows. We all froze. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on the trailer door. Janice's face went pale. She moved to the window, peeked through the curtain and whispered, "Too late, he's found you." I stepped toward the door. But the message echoed in my mind. Don't trust Janice. I turned back. She was holding a scalpel. Evan shouted. I ducked just in time. She wasn't protecting us. She was baiting us. We ran out the back, into the woods, and the trailer exploded behind us. We hit the ground hard, heat licked at our backs as debris flew overhead. Something whistled past my ear and buried itself in a tree trunk. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Evan yanked me to my feet. Move. We ran. No plan, just instinct. The woods behind Janice's place were thick and unlit. Branches clawed at our faces and arms. The only light came from the glow of the flames behind us. After what felt like an hour, we collapsed behind a fallen log. Evan doubled over, coughing, and I leaned back, staring through the trees. Was that really her? He asked between breaths. I shook my head. I don't think so. It looked like her, but her eyes, she hesitated. Mom wouldn't hesitate. He wiped his mouth. You think Wright got to her? I think whatever he is, I said. It's not working alone anymore. Evan pulled out the envelope we'd grabbed before escaping. It was partially scorched, but the contents inside were intact. I unfolded the photo again. Mom in scrubs standing beside a hospital bed with a black box attached to the IV pole. Written on the back in faded ink. Test phase, Juliet 1. This thing, I whispered. Whatever Juliet was, it wasn't just a file. It was a device, a machine. Evan pulled out a folded page from the envelope schematics, diagrams of the device, handwritten annotations in red, symbols that looked ancient. We both stared at them, and I felt the pressure building in my head. Like something in my skull was trying to burst out. A scream echoed through the woods behind us. Janice's scream. Only. She was dead. We didn't speak, just ran again toward the road, toward anyone, away from the sound. But in the wind, through the trees, a voice rode on the air. You found it. Now finish it. We didn't have time to grieve or process. The voice haunted every shadow. We had to act. Evan and I decided to break into St. Francis Hospital, the same place where Mom spent her last months, where Wright still held the keys to so many secrets. We dressed in black, hid our faces under hoodies, and slipped through a side entrance Evan had scoped out. The night was thick with fog, a soft mist that blurred the harsh hospital lights. Inside, the corridors were sterile and silent. Too silent, every step echoed off the walls. We headed straight for the medical records department. The security cameras were old, the guards few. But the real challenge was the locked vault where they stored archived files. Evan pulled out a lockpick set he'd bought online. His hands trembled as he worked. Almost there, he whispered. Suddenly, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming our way. We hid behind a filing cabinet. A tall figure in a white coat appeared. The hallway light flickered. It was him. Dr. Alan Wright. He paused, sensing something, looked directly at the filing cabinet, then moved on. We exhaled quietly. When he was gone, Evan finished the lock. Inside the vault were boxes labeled with years and codes. We found one marked Juliet Protocol, Phase 1. Inside, detailed research notes, photos of devices hooked up to patients, and a list of names. Patients, nurses, doctors. And next to each name, a date, some recent. I realized with a cold rush that the list wasn't just historical. It was active. We were on it. We grabbed as much as we could carry and slipped out. But as we reached the exit, alarms blared. We ran, heart pounding, security guards behind us. Evan pushed me into a supply closet and locked the door. We crouched in darkness, trying to control our breathing. Then the door handle rattled. A voice whispered from the other side, "You can't run." We didn't answer. The door stopped shaking. We waited until the footsteps faded, then slipped out through an emergency exit. Outside, the cold night air hit our faces. We didn't speak, because we knew this was only the beginning. We barely had time to catch our breath when the phone rang. No caller ID, no ringtone, just the cold buzz of silence. I answered. A voice distorted, unnatural, whispered. You shouldn't have come. They watch. They wait. And soon, they will finish it or be finished. The line went dead. Evan's face paled. It's him. Before I could ask, the power cut out. Our phones died simultaneously. Then came a knock at the door. Slow, measured, not human. We grabbed whatever weapons we could find. The door rattled, the lock clicked, and the shadows in the hallway thickened. We weren't alone anymore. The air grew thick and cold. The shadows stretched along the walls, twisting and crawling like living things. Evan held a kitchen knife in one hand and a baseball bat in the other. I gripped the heavy flashlight, swinging it in slow arcs, searching for any sign of movement. Then a whisper echoed, barely audible. "You can't hide." The front door shuddered, as if pushed by a great force. Evan shouted, "We need to get out." We darted past the living room towards the back door, but it slammed shut before we could reach it. Trapped. Suddenly the lights flickered on and off, faster and faster, until everything plunged into darkness. I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the house. Then a low growl, and the scratching of nails on wood. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would burst. We backed into a corner, and then the darkness gave shape. A figure emerged. Tall, thin, eyes glowing faint red. Dr. Wright. His smile was too wide, too cold. His voice when he spoke was a hollow rasp that seemed to echo from the walls. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed. "The Juliet Project must remain buried." Evan swung the bat, but Wright vanished, reappearing behind him. Evan gasped as an invisible force slammed him into the wall. I raised the flashlight, shining it directly at Wright. The light seemed to hurt him, making his form flicker like a bad signal. "Leave now," I shouted, "or we'll finish this." He laughed, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "You think a light can stop me? I am older than this building, stronger than your fears." The walls began to bleed shadows. The room warped, time fractured. I grabbed Evan's hand. "We have to get to the basement." He nodded, struggling to his feet. Together we ran for the stairs, Wright's laughter chasing us down the hall. The basement door was shut tight. I reached for the knob. It turned, slowly, and then the door swung open on its own. The basement smelled of damp earth and old wood. A stale chill seeped out, curling around our legs like smoke. We stepped inside, flashlights barely piercing the thick shadows. The air felt heavier here, as if it was pressing down on us. The walls were lined with faded hospital blueprints, yellowed and torn. Symbols were scrawled over them, circles, triangles, glyphs I couldn't recognize. At the far end was a stone altar, rough and stained. A single candle flickered atop it, casting long, quivering shadows. Wright's voice echoed through the darkness. "You've come far, but this is where it ends." The candle exploded, plunging us into complete darkness. A chill wrapped around me, and I heard whispers, voices of patients, nurses, screams from decades ago. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Not Evan's. I spun around. Nothing but darkness. The basement door slammed shut behind us. We were trapped. The whispers grew louder, layering over each other until it was a cacophony of pain and warning. I fumbled for the notebook, fingers trembling. Evan shone his light on the altar, revealing a dusty book bound in cracked leather. "This must be it," I said, reaching out. As I touched it, a cold wind whipped through the basement, scattering papers and snuffing out our lights. Wright's voice was everywhere. "The project must continue. The sacrifices must be made." Evan grabbed my arm, dragging me back. "We need to destroy it." But the book throbbed beneath my fingers, alive. I opened it. The pages glowed faintly, revealing diagrams of machines hooked up to human bodies, patients like Mom. Symbols pulsed, resonating with the glyphs on the walls. "The Juliet device," I whispered. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a figure. It was Mom. But not her. Her eyes were black voids, her mouth twisted in silent screams. "She reached for us," I screamed, and then woke up, in my own bed. But the book was real, and so was the fight. The morning sun was cruelly bright after the nightmare. I stared at the book on my nightstand, its leather cover still warm to the touch. Evan was already on his way over. We needed a plan. Answers. We pored over the red notebook and the new leather tome side by side, tracing symbols and comparing notes. The Juliet Project wasn't just a medical experiment. It was a ritual, a blood sacrifice masked as science. "Look at this," Evan said, pointing to a symbol I hadn't noticed before, a circle intersected by a dagger. "That's the mark of the ward," I said, recalling Janice's words. "It's supposed to keep the entity trapped." "But it's fading," Evan said. "Look at the cracks in the altar photos." We realized the ritual was failing. The entity was gaining strength. If the ward broke completely, it would be unleashed on the world. We had to act. But first we needed more help. I reached out to Natalie, the journalist who had helped us before. She agreed to meet. We planned to expose the hospital's darkest secrets to the world. And maybe, just maybe, end the nightmare. Natalie's apartment was a cluttered war room of papers, laptops, and coffee cups. She welcomed us with tired eyes and a forced smile. "I've been digging into St. Francis for months," she said, spreading out documents on her kitchen table. "They've buried everything: malpractice, cover-ups, even deaths like your mom's." We showed her the notebook and the leather book. Her eyes widened. "If this is real," she said, "it's huge, but exposing it won't be easy." She outlined the plan: gather testimonies, secure leaked documents, and prepare for a media storm. But threats came fast. A black van idled outside her building. Phones started ringing with silence. Anonymous messages warned us to stop. One night, Natalie's laptop was hacked. Files vanished. Still, we pressed on. We held secret meetings, collected stories, and built a case. But every step forward felt like we were running into a wall. And the entity wasn't waiting. One evening, as I left Natalie's apartment, I felt eyes watching from the shadows. The hunt was on. The city felt colder that night. Evan and I slipped through back alleys, constantly looking over our shoulders. Our phones buzzed endlessly with anonymous threats, warning us to stop digging. We'd found a safe house, but it didn't feel safe. Then, in the dark, headlights flooded the street. A black SUV screeched to a halt beside us. Doors slammed open. Figures emerged. We ran. The chase was on. We darted through crowds, dodged into buildings, and climbed fire escapes. Heart pounding, lungs burning, every step a fight. At one point, Evans stumbled and nearly fell. A hand grabbed his collar and yanked him backward. I spun around, ready to fight. But it was Natalie. She pulled us into an abandoned warehouse. "They're closing in," she said, eyes wild. "We need a new plan." I nodded, breathless. "We need to finish this now." Outside, the city's lights flickered and dimmed. A cold wind swept through the streets. And the hunt was far from over. We gathered what we could from the safe house: notes, tapes, symbols drawn in haste. Natalie had a contact, a paranormal investigator with access to ancient rituals and modern technology. We arranged a meeting. He was an older man with sharp eyes and a worn leather jacket. He called himself Carter. "You're playing with forces older than you can imagine," he warned. "Juliet isn't just a project, it's a curse, a prison, and Wright is its warden." Carter laid out a plan to strengthen the ward using a combination of ritual and technology. But it required us to go back to the basement and perform a dangerous ceremony. There was no guarantee it would work. But it was the only shot. We prepared ourselves. The basement awaited. We returned to the basement under cover of night, Carter leading the way. The air was thick, suffocating, like the house itself was holding its breath. We set candles in a circle, chalked symbols on the floor, and placed relics Carter provided: iron nails, salt, and a crystal pulsating with a faint blue light. "The ritual will bind the entity," Carter said, "but Wright will try to stop us." As we began the chant, shadows coalesced and a deep growl filled the room. Wright appeared, twisted and malevolent. He lunged. The fight was brutal, physical and spiritual. We struggled to complete the ritual as Wright attacked, his form flickering in and out of the mortal plane. With a final desperate cry, Carter completed the chant. A blast of light filled the basement. Wright screamed, caught in the binding. The shadows dissipated. Silence? We were alive. But the ward was fragile. And the fight was not over. The dawn felt wrong. The usual birdsong was absent, replaced by a heavy silence that wrapped around the house like a shroud. We sat in the kitchen, exhausted but alive. The leather book lay closed on the table. Carter warned, "The ward holds, but only just. Wright's power is tied to it. If it breaks, he'll return stronger. We knew this was just the calm before the storm. Natalie updated us on the media. The story was breaking: names, evidence, the hospital's secrets splashed across news outlets. Threats had escalated. Security was tighter. We had to be careful. But something was different. The hauntings seemed to recede. The house felt lighter, almost hopeful. Still, the shadows lingered at the edges. And every night, I prayed this peace would last. The news reports stirred the city, but the real storm brewed in shadows. Late one night, Evan heard noises from the basement. I followed, heart pounding. The ward was cracking. The symbols glowed faintly, flickering in and out. Wright's laughter echoed. Faint but clear. "You can't hold me," it taunted. We rushed to reinforce the symbols with salt and chalk, but the ground trembled. Suddenly, the basement floor cracked, revealing a pit of writhing shadows. From it, a figure emerged. Not Wright, but something older, darker. An ancient entity feeding on the curse. We realized then, the project had never been just about Wright. It was a gateway. And the real nightmare was only beginning. We stood before the pit, a maw of darkness that seemed to breathe. The entity rose, its form shifting, shadow, smoke, and bone. Wright's figure flickered beside it, chained and powerless. Carter began the counter-ritual, chanting words older than time. Evan and I joined, voices trembling but determined. The shadows screamed, clawed, and writhed. Light and darkness collided. For a moment, everything stopped. Then the pit sealed. The entity vanished. The house exhaled. But the cost was clear. Carter collapsed, drained. Wright's chains shattered. He screamed, defeated, but not destroyed. I looked at Evan. It's over. For now. But somewhere deep beneath the earth, the darkness waited. And so did we. The house finally felt like home again. The hauntings had faded. The shadows retreated. Evan and I rebuilt our lives, honoring Mom's memory by exposing the truth. The hospital's corruption was public. Investigations started. Wright's name was blacklisted. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear a soft humming, the music box's melody from Mom's childhood. I smile. Because some ghosts don't leave. They stay. To remind us that truth matters. And that the fight is never truly over.